Guys, like, comment, subscribe, share the video, especially if you love college football as much as I do. I just got through doing a Phil Steele video, my own reaction to the top 25. I named the top 25 in order, and I talked about whether I agreed or disagreed. And now I'm going to talk about my top 25. Now, some of those teams, I don't think I need to explain them, especially in the certain spots that they're at. But some of them I will explain because some of them are not even Phil Steele's top 25. And since he's widely respected and most people look at him and say, well, that sounds about right, I'm going to explain mine. Also, before I get started, shout out to that, man. Jay Carnicom and Joshua Mundy. I appreciate what they're doing. See, I'm going to school to be a teacher, and I've already been teaching as a paraprofessional. And anytime I see people that stand up for kids and help protect kids and make it less likely for kids to get violated like they do by predators, I think it's amazing that those guys are exposing people like them and making it, now I wouldn't say safer for the streets, like for kids to be out there and whatnot, but at least the adults in the kids' lives can say, well, I know who to keep my kids away from in the future. So I appreciate them doing that. That makes me happy. I think other educators should support them too. They should, Yeah. Number 1, I have Georgia. Number 2, I have Michigan. 3, I have Ohio State. 4, Penn State might confuse some people. I like how they have most of their team coming back. I love their defensive coordinator, Manny Diaz. I know all about him because I'm a Florida State fan. He whooped Florida State twice. So I agree, and I think Penn State is good enough to beat Michigan or Ohio State. I don't think they're good enough to beat both in the same year. It's possible, but it's less likely. I think they'll beat one of them and lose to the other. So that's why I have them in my top 5. Number 5, I have Alabama. No need to explain Alabama. Alabama is Alabama. Nick Saban is Nick Saban. That man is always ready. 6, I have USC. I'm not putting them in my top 5 because they have not shown me any kind of defense. But their offense is amazing. And they have Caleb Williams coming back, who I think is a great quarterback. Number 7, Florida State. Now I have 8 Clemson, 9 LSU. Florida State's above both, and I'll tell you why. When it comes to a complete football team, Florida State is that right now. The passing game, the running game, the offensive line, everything was clicking last year. And defensively, their pass defense was pretty darn good. Here's the thing. Florida State had good players last year, but they weren't flooded. And even today, they're not flooded with 5 stars. But they're well coached. Mike Norvell is about to have his 4th year, so now he's had his own beliefs, his own philosophy enforced. And I think Florida State is good enough to beat both Clemson and LSU this year. Now, I picked them to lose to Clemson because it's at Clemson. But if they play again, I think they can beat them. They're both good enough to beat each other. Clemson's number 8. Their pass defense was atrocious, and their run defense was not very good either. They gave up a lot of rushing yards to Florida State and Notre Dame in those games. And they could only put up 14 points on a defenseless Tennessee. I say defenseless because their pass defense was not very good. But they got beat up front in the trenches, and that's something that I think Florida State will capitalize on this year, given who they got in the transfer portal. Go look it up so you can see what I'm talking about. Number 9, I have LSU. The only problem I have with LSU is I do think Jaden Daniels, he didn't pass great last year, but you know what the big problem was? Offensive line. If you cannot protect your quarterback and you have to rely on your defense, who I think will be good for LSU this year, you are going to lose to teams like Florida State and Alabama, who are more complete teams. Because if your offensive line can't block, you can't get your offense going unless you get big explosive plays every now and then. So that's why I have LSU in my top 10, but they're not above Florida State or Clemson or even Alabama, even though they're good enough to beat Florida State last year and they beat Bama. It don't matter. Number 10, Washington. Phil still had them in his top 15. I have them in the top 10. They have their quarterback return. They have most of their team coming back. I think they are the favorite, in my opinion, to win the Pac-12 this year. Well, speaking of Pac-12, Utah at number 11. They're not the most talented team, but they're so well coached. They have Cameron Rising coming back, so that's huge for their offense. Most of their defense comes back. So if anybody can win the Pac-12 and possibly make a playoff, it could be Utah. But because of their lack of elite talent against teams like Michigan, Ohio State, Bama, or Georgia, that hurts them. Number 12, I have Notre Dame. I have them outside the top 10 because they lost a lot of starters on defense. But they did get Sam Hartman in the transfer portal. And because their head coach, Marcus Freeman, who's a second-year coach, that will help him. But I still think he has some learning to go through. I think the learning pains showed up against Marshall and Stanford. Because clearly Notre Dame was better. But they could be suspect to lose one of those games this year. So that's why I don't have them in my top 10. But they could be in the top 10. They're good enough to be in the top 10. So, yeah. I have Texas A&M number 13. I love the hire with Bobby Petrino at an offensive coordinator. But they got to show me something. They can't be winning a few games and losing too many games like they did last year. That's unacceptable. Oregon, I have 14. Their offense was amazing with Bo Nix, but their defense has got to play better and get more stops and be more dominant. 15, I have Tennessee. Tennessee lost a lot on offense, but I do think Joe Milton's perfect for that offense. He's got a really good arm. I think Tennessee's defense has nowhere to go but up. How much better will it be? That's why I have them in the top 15 and not top 10. 16, I have Texas. Texas, I have them really low. Until they show me something with Sarkisian that he knows to run the football when he has a good running back, and to not throw so much because his quarterback it's dumb play calling. That's why I don't have him in the top 10, because it's the same coaching staff. Yeah, they have a lot of talent, but until I see something special, I'm not putting them anywhere near the top 10. Sorry, that's just me. I'm a Texas fan. So 17, Oregon State, they deserve to be up there. They have a lot of their team coming back. They won 10 games last year. They won their bowl game. They beat Oregon. So they have a lot of momentum coming into this year. They could finish higher or a little lower, but they should be in the top 25 by the end of the year. 18, South Carolina. South Carolina was not in Stills' top 25. They deserve to be there. They got most of their team coming back. They have Spencer Rattler coming back, who I think is going to have a better year than last year. And they beat top 10 teams last year. They can certainly do it again. I expect more than 8 wins this year. 19, TCU. They're in my top 20. They're not the most talented team, but their coaching staff is amazing. Sonny Dykes, you could not ask for a better first year than he had, taken into the national title after not making a bowl game last year. I expect TCU to win more games this year. I don't know if they'll be that good this year, but pretty darn good. They could get 10 wins. I think they're good enough to beat Texas. 20, Wisconsin, new coaching staff. What could hurt them is that they're trying to switch over to a more of a passing offense than a smash mouth running offense. That could help them or hurt them. I don't know. That's why I have them at 20. 21, I have Auburn. This is where I got some explaining to do. Auburn hit the transfer portal, and they have a new head coach, Hugh Freeze. I do think Auburn is good enough to be in the top 25. They can beat some of these teams given the players that they had, and Hugh Freeze is a winning coach who knows what he's doing. 22, I have North Carolina. No need to explain that. They had no defense, but their offense was amazing. 23rd, I have Oklahoma. I don't think I need to explain that too much either because of the players that they have there. They can play with anybody, but they got to fix that defense. 24, Oklahoma State. I might need to explain this. Mike Gundy brought in a new defensive coordinator. He always coaches good enough to be a winning coach who can play with teams. He's been beating teams like Texas, who's supposed to be in the top 10. He can beat Oklahoma this year. So I think they belong in the top 24. And 25, Miami. This is the one I got to explain. They finished 5-7. But Crystal Ball knows what he's doing. He's a winning coach. He made Oregon where it is right now, to where Dan Lanning can pick up the leftovers and just run with it. That was already established there. If he could do that with Oregon in a more competitive conference overall, what do you think he can do with Miami in year 2 with most of his players and him switching up that roster? They're elite. They're loaded with players. So I got them in the top 25.